And the White House's National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, Admiral John Kirby, joins me. Good evening, sir. And of course, you know, there was your long history working at the Pentagon as well. When we see the atrocities that are still going on in Ukraine, is there any end in sight? Do we have any information that this is getting close to the end?
Actually, Greta, sadly, no. In fact, just in the last day or so, we've heard from the Kremlin that they have no intention of seeking a diplomatic end to this war, and every intention, quite the contrary, to continuing to prosecute this war against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And that's obviously regrettable for everybody around the world, not just the people in Ukraine. Mr. Putin should do the right thing by getting out now, pulling his troops out, sitting down in good faith with President Zelensky and ending this unprovoked invasion that he himself started now 6 months ago.
You know, you talk about Putin doing it, but I don't even understand. I mean, this seems like such madness, such cruelty. I mean, and they're using rape as a weapon for the women. They're torturing men. There's a castrating men. I mean, the stories that were, you know, the stories we're hearing are they're horrendous. But what about the people like the Foreign Minister Lavrov? He's been there for almost 20 years. I mean, how is it that all of Putin's advisors are so equally evil in supporting him on this?
Well, it's difficult to know who exactly Mr. Putin's listening to or how much influence that they have on them. But it's clear that the entire Kremlin establishment, to include his ministerial staff, are complicit in this completely unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. And that's why, and you've heard Secretary Blinken talk about this, we're going to continue to support international efforts to document these atrocities and to make sure that Russia can be held properly accountable.
And what is that accountability? I mean, even that's even sort of a tough struggle, you know, in terms of, I mean, we look back historically on war crimes since World War II, no matter, you know, where it is. Yeah. I mean, how do we hold people accountable when what they have done is just so unthinkable? There is no punishment for that, and it's so big.
You know, I take your point. I mean, when you look at the atrocities that have been committed against the Ukrainian people, it's hard to say, look at any of them and say, you know, there's a just punishment for that, because it is just so awful and so ghastly. But it is important that the international community look for ways to hold Russia accountable, and they will. That will happen in the future, and the United States will be assisting in the efforts to document, to analyze, to provide information to these international tribunals that will have to be held to hold Mr. Putin and the Russian government accountable. In the meantime, we believe it's really important that the international community also continue to support Ukraine and Ukrainians' armed forces. And so, United States, we just announced a package of security assistance not long ago. There will be more coming. We're going to continue to stay at it, as the president said, for as long as it takes, so that the Ukrainians can continue to defend themselves against these kinds of atrocities.
You know, it's such a tough moral debate because a lot of people in this country are hurting. I get that. If you see the pictures, or if you've been to Ukraine, I've been there. I've now made 2 trips to the region in 4 months, and I know a lot of humanitarian workers there. But then you hear people in America say, "Why are we spending money there?" And it's really, you know, it's sort of tough to. This is a discussion the country should be having a lot about, so that we understand why we're doing this.
I couldn't agree more with you, Greta, and I'm glad that you've gone, and I hope you're able to go in the future, because it's really important for independent reporters like you to get on the ground and see it for yourselves and report from Ukraine, so that not just the American people, but publics around the world can continue to see what Russia's up to inside Ukraine and how important it is for the international community to hang together here and to continue to support Ukraine, because this is bigger. It's obviously the main focus, and you're right, is on Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. I don't mean to dismiss that at all, but there is a larger principle at stake here, and that's one of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And there just has to be enough consequence and cost on Mr. Putin and Russia so that this kind of thing can't happen again. And one of the ways to keep that heat and light on Russia and Mr. Putin is for free and independent reporting out of Ukraine, so that people can see these they're ghastly images. I understand that, and they're tough to look at. It's tough to hear these stories. It's tough to see you have to report these stories, but they're very, very important for everybody to pay attention to.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you very much for joining me, sir.
My pleasure, Greta. Thank you.